Hello, Bufera. Hello, Adele. How are you both doing today?
Good, Sam.
Good?
Great.
That's good. Okay, so today we'll be talking about a very interesting topic, which is the next generation and their roles in philanthropy. So over the next decade, we'll see such a transfer in terms of role as well as the largest wealth, they say. And so we'll be talking about that today. So perhaps the first question I have is for Ibu Vera. Bu Vera, how do you see the potential of the next generation in continuing the role of the philanthropy in the next decade?
When you ask about potential, you have to look at the generational traits. From my generation, Gen X, I guess, up to the millennials and then Gen Z, we see that meaning and purpose becomes more important as the generation progresses. That means it does not mean the older generation never gives, but this newer generation, millennials and Gen Z, they are more into giving because they want to seek meaning and the higher purpose of their life. That said, the struggle to get talents for companies, traditional companies that has no sustainability report or impact in their radar in doing their business will be harder to get the next talent because when they're asked to buy the same products, one shampoo empower a certain XYZ community and the other one is just manufactured, they would pick this one. So that's the kind of thing that we are looking. So to answer that, the potential is huge and that it gives us hope because the more each generation wants to create, meaning they create impact through their life, through what they do, and that's what is sustainable.
Okay, I love that how you, bring it back to sustainability. And you're such a key player in the world of philanthropy, and I feel like your experience has great testimonies, it can teach a lot, right? So in terms of preparing the next generation, because as you said, it doesn't mean that the older generation it's done for them, but they can continue to give to the next generation, right? So from your side, how have you prepared the next generation? And of course that contributes to Adele as well.
Did I actually prepare you? I don't think consciously I did, but I guess the older generation, that's sad. Whenever I say myself, like the older generation, you just have to, I guess, number one, walk the talk, right? So you have to live a life of example in terms of giving. I guess she grew up, I don't know, she probably can tell you a story how much my kids, Adele, was involved from day one when we started Whitecap. That was 29. You were two. Okay, I took you out when you were older, so that was around when you were 4, 5, or 6. I remember took them out for Baksos, the community service when we distribute staples, like rice and all of that, and then. It's a military operation going to really poor community and try to give away food, right? So they were there. I don't know if they remember the trauma, but I was traumatic because there was an incident that people just keep coming even though they just demand more, and then there was a bit of chaotic situation. I was so scared for them because I think Phil was there too. We hit them in the little room, I don't remember that.
I think when people think of the word generation, they think it's this massive thing. The younger generation, the older generation, we put them into categories and buckets, right? But I think at the end of the day, it boils down to an individual. And in this case, it boils down to even your children, right? Like you might think, I don't have a role in the next generation because XYZ. But just see the people around you. You're here, I'm here. And I'm sure, you have families or you have close ones that you can influence. And so I think every single person has their own sphere of influence. And I think going back to the question of how do you prepare the next generation, right? I think it's like a trick question because I don't think you can ever prepare them for what the world is, but I think you can lay the foundation. I'm not sure if that's similar or not, but I think what my mom did growing up, exactly what she said, leading by example, but also I think when you lead by example, you help grow the muscle of empathy. And I think empathy is something that is characteristic of our generation. Maybe we're a little bit over empathetic. We feel so much about everything. We're angered so much about everything. We want to fight against everything. But I think that empathy that was planted in me since I was a young kid came from my interactions, right? It wasn't, it wasn't just like online interactions, because back then when we were kids, I don't think there was Wi-Fi yet. I still remember the days. We're in 97, so Wi-Fi somehow wasn't there yet. I remember the days where you have to like listen to the computer ring a little bit.
It's the internet, like a dial.
Yeah, the dialing. Yeah. So I feel like I'm not so much of a Gen Z. I'm like in the middle of a Gen Z and millennials. I wasn't born in the generation of Instagram. I started Instagram middle school. I wasn't born in TikTok. I don't play TikTok right now. But I think I understand that going back to that point of empathy, it comes with offline interactions. It comes with meeting people in person and going to the field. And for me, I think that really shaped my character. Like my mom would she never forced us, she just invited us, and we just saw how privileged we were. We visited, a home, for instance, of a family and a single mother who lives by the train tracks. And for us, it was a field trip. But for them, it was their reality, And I think that realization, every single year by year, and seeing not only the desperation, but seeing how my mom's work can actually change lives and influence lives, gives you an optimistic spirit. It's easy to break down when you see so much injustice and pain and suffering. But I think when you couple that with people doing action, people creating programs, people being generous, I think you sort of transform that pain and that suffering into something worth fighting for. So I think that's what influences me.
I guess.
Yes, that's what influences me.
I guess it goes beyond just words. I mean, parents can always teach, but then if they never see, they never experience, it's just hollow words, right? So engage them when they're young, I think, to shape their empathy, and at the end of the day, they can respond well to the all the deeds around us. This is how you respond. It's not, and you have that intentionality, I guess, in your soul. If you want to change something, you want to transform something, you want to create impact, it all comes out from the inside of you. Not, you're not doing it for popularity, you're not doing it because it's kind of trending, but you're doing it because you want to change the world and you want to see impact. So there's an integrity of the impact as well, which we can talk a little bit more about impact, because nowadays it's not just about giving, it's not just about charity. So this is the shift of paradigm when people say or put it in such a box that, giving is always great, to give without expecting anything back. Indonesia tanpa pamrih, right? That's the best, the highest rank of giving. But nowadays, there's a lot of innovation, I guess, in the field of financing social change, because people are just tired with aid, and people, of course, abuse and misuse humanitarian project money. Happens everywhere, even countries at country level. So then the second, I guess, paper result came, right? A couple, maybe in the last decade, paper result. I'm not paying in a front, not up front, but when the change happened, I reimburse your cost for change. So that's kind of, it's about risk, right? How do you de-risk the humanitarian and the money that comes into this sector? So then now it's shifting into what we know as impact investment, social investment. It kind of have a better ring with the generation too, in the generations of, ventures and investment and all of these startups, right? It feels like kind of sits well better. Yeah, it has that impact investing part of trying to create change in a sustainable way. So that's the whole shift, I guess, what I see in my lifetime. I'm beginning my journey in YCAP not knowing about CSR, but believe it or not, right? I think either year 6 or year 5 since our existence, we actually then were engaged with some multinationals and work on the CSR. So CSR has also shifted to a CSV with a shared value. So the change, the social change tied in with the business itself, right? The value, added value to the business. So we can talk on the space of all this, from philanthropy, the whole quantum of capital, from philanthropy to financial gain while creating impact. But at the end of the day, it's just the how, right? The heart of it is still trying to change something. The status quo of poverty, the status quo of inequality. That's what we're trying to do. And I guess they just have to, the next gen have to choose their teams, right? What's their mission? I mean, if the calling is kind of clear, what it is that they want to do to create the better world.
I love that, and I think the biggest takeaway that I got from what you guys shared were 2 things, obviously. The first being how you were saying, you know, when people hear the word generation, they'd be like, oh, I'm not a part of that. That's too big for me. But you're saying, you know, it really just takes that one individual. And even for you, Adele, it's a very personal journey and how you came to be where you're right now. And even from Bufera as well, of course, I read your book. And for you itself, it's a personal journey, right? And I love that. And I guess this leads to our next question in the part where Bufera was saying, you know, there is a shift in terms of focus. And now more than just, oh yeah, I give money, but they want impact. And that is a different scope in the sense, as you were saying, you know, the heart of it needs to be stronger, right? So I guess when we're talking about like the next generation in their role in this new shift, what would you say is the biggest challenge? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges, right? But I think I want to make one point. Sorry, I can't help myself about one thing that you said that I really want to emphasize. I think there's a change of mindset in even the word philanthropy. I think our generation, when we think about philanthropy, we think of it as something that's quite old school. It's like only people who are really rich and wealthy and old in the end of their life can give, billionaires that we see. But I think what's been really exciting that I've seen in the last few years, even with the boom of the digital economy, with startup founders, with young people amassing a lot of wealth from their innovation and their businesses, is that we in the Gen Z millennials have the power, right? Have the resources finally to actually create change as well. And so I think people used to be really against philanthropy because they imagine it to be a certain stereotype in the Western world, especially it was like the West giving to the rest. But I think now it's actually an autonomous thing where individuals have the power wherever they're at because of this globalized world. But I think going back to the challenges, as much as, you know, there are multimillionaire young people more than ever, maybe, I think one big challenge is always a lack of resources for young people. We always feel like we have so much passion. We go out of school, or during school, we have so much idealism, right? So much drive. And you step into reality and you realize that you can't do much in this world without money, right? And so I think that's it, like bridging. As being as realistic as that, like as much as you have passion, as much as you have purpose, you sort of have to still meet ends meet to help.
And this is exactly the business model should change too. The business model of those who try to create impact. You know, if you're just traditional, nothing wrong with being traditional yayasan or foundations and all, nothing wrong with that at all. But it's just that depending on the kind of activities that you want to do, then you can actually find that innovation and how to fund that, you know, social change they want to achieve. So yeah, I guess from the perspective of the givers, there should be another a world of the doers, right? They have to also adjust with the reality that the importance of that sustainable financial sustainability in creating impact. So I guess that's the biggest challenge. I guess not just the next gen, but us, and I guess the doers. I mean, I found myself in a very unique, I guess, position where starting out as a foundation, right? We work with multinationals and all of that, but now also through YCAP Ventures, we're investing in Adele can tell you a little bit about the impact fund that we created that will empower women, and we actually launched it at AVPN last year. So this is all the whole, I guess. You just have to be flexible, I guess, with the reality on the ground. What's the best way to solve problems sustainably? So that's the key words. And then you can't be closed-minded. You have to be open-minded. It's not one kind of a business model fits for all. It has to have that kind of element of adjustment to what really works. So, but I just remember how I inspired, if that's the word, engage my kids into philanthropy, and then she in turn inspired me going into the next journey, which is through YCAP Ventures. She took me on the field trip. It was it was my turn to chaperone. She was 12 and she wanted to know how microfinance worked, bank by a bank or a non-bank institution. I don't know where that idea came from, but I remember she and several of her peers went to a village not far from where we live, like an hour away. But then I don't remember. I think there's an electricity problem. It's not even fully electrified at that point of time. And we're talking about Jakarta here, and I was just taken aback with the reality of the poverty and I think the potential through that financial inclusion. So then YCAP went into it just for sustainability and also addressing the broader issue just outside of education. To enable education, we have to enable the economy of the families. So we inspire them, they inspire us back. So I guess this is also the cycle that will just keep happening in our lifetime, right? And then I think that's because there's an open-mindedness. The younger generation is open-minded to what is possible, the things that I can do, that kind of thing, when you kind of have that sensitivity and empathy to the world. But then in turn, the older generation, when we've already in the middle of trying to solve problem, but there's an opportunity to learn. So learning never ends. And I think that's the whole cycle. And I think that's value of, we will learn from each other. It's not just the old teaching the young, but the young can also teach the older generation. Yeah.
Such a good lesson to learn, really.
And it needs to be emphasized because I think now a lot of young people, because they're fueled by injustice with so much anger, there's a lot of us that just refuses, to listen to wisdom. And I think that generational gap of knowledge transfer has to flow exactly upwards, but also downwards, right? And I think the opening mindedness, it doesn't only come, usually we only blame like the older people. They don't listen to us, they don't value our opinion. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that they've walked the path in front of us. Right. And there's no blame game in this fight towards equality, empowerment, right? Yeah, so I think the challenge is to really bridge that generational gap of power, generational gap of resources, generation gap of knowledge as well. And that's why I think I'm really lucky, because whenever I'm passionate about something, I just go to my mom and I can talk to her about it. I think these conversations have to be multiplied across the world, so that passion just doesn't stay in passionate and energetic individuals, and they can be resourced. They can be it can be helped and supported by other people out there.
But I think the big challenge for my generation is actually to keep that flame alive, right? I mean, life gets in the way, right? This and that happens, and sometimes no matter how, Adele has the big heart for the world, but then, you just have to keep that flame up and keep burning. That's the hardest part, I think, because, how to keep it relevant. That doing good, giving is good. But before, probably when they're burning, they kind of give their best, everything, like time, talent, treasure. But at some point, it's just the time. At some point, it's just the treasure, because I get some people to just do it for me. So we want this to be the cohesive kind of, giving everything, not just your money, not just your time, but also your talent. And think about how to create change. That's the hardest, to keep that flame up, over the years or decades.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear the experience that you have, and you still experience these kinds of issues, in day-to-day life. But perhaps moving on to the next topic. Now, Adele, you're doing very interesting things in the world of social impact. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, with IWF.
Sure, yeah. So, as my mom said, I think YCAP has a very unique position because it sits across, I think, almost all the spectrum of the continuum of capital. We started out as a foundation. At the same time, we were always supported by different business units because my mom has always wanted to create something social good that was financially sustainable. So 20 years ago, it wasn't even called a social enterprise yet, right? But here we are 20 years later, someone codified it, which is great because it sets an infrastructure for us to work in. But we have a nonprofit, we have business units, but also we have a venture, right? We have a venture arm that does two things. We do microfinancing for mothers, giving them small loans in order to grow their businesses because we believe in the power of women. But also aside of that, we do our impact investing. And this is the newest part of our social enterprise group. And this one with IWF, as you mentioned, it's called Indonesian Women Empowerment Fund. It's a $10 million impact fund co-managed by YCAP Ventures, co-managed by Moonshot Ventures, supported by Investing in Women, which is an initiative by the Australian government. And I think this one's really exciting because the underlying philosophy of YCAP since the beginning of age was the belief in change, but also the belief of the power of women. We believe that if we invest in women, we will see change not only in individuals, but in their families, in their communities. And so what started off as microfinance, now aside from that, we also have this Gender Lens Fund where we're looking for early stage tech companies in Indonesia, looking to invest in them, not only financially, not only in capital, but also in their technical capacity, right? And I think this type of social innovation is something that's still growing, and I hope my vision is in the next 10 years or 20 years, Gender Lens, what we call Gender Lens, wouldn't even be only sidelined in this impact investment field, but it'll actually be in mainstream business, because I think what people are scared of is the misconception of Gender Lens. You're like, oh, you only want to invest in women, what happens to all the men, right? But never once do we say that when you invest and empower women, you step down on men. It just says that you acknowledge that there are gender biases and stereotypes that have prohibited women to succeed more than men in the future because of the biases, systemic biases that exist. And so I think with Gender Lens, it's just you see the world clearer, you acknowledge the things that you're blind to. And I love a quote about privilege. Privilege isn't so much about what you have, but it's about a lot of the things that you don't have to go through. And I think, a lot of people don't know maybe the biases that we as women face because they didn't have to go through that. And I think, being a young woman, being in this generation that really wants to fight for social good, I think it's an exciting time because the vehicle is no longer just a nonprofit. It's no longer just a yayasan. There's so many vehicles out there. You can choose, you can innovate, you can fight for one, right? If your heart is more for social activism, that's your field. Go for it. If your heart is like, I believe in the power of financial markets to create change, and I see the power of entrepreneurship, and that's in your heart, then go for that. I think now it's where there's no more barriers. There's no more walls in what you can do. People used to think change can only happen in a nonprofit sector. Now it's an open playing field. You can do change wherever you are, in a startup, in government, and there's proven case studies for that. And for me, I believe the change can happen in enterprises, in investments, as well as nonprofits. and I think that's influenced by my parents, who are both in the nonprofit and the investment part. But I think just acknowledging where you come from as well, and hoping and fighting for the future you want to live in, right?
Yeah.
So that's my little spiel on how everything I think in this life comes together, and you don't always know where you're going, but you know what you're passionate about, and you just fight for it step by step.
Yeah, that's really good. Maybe to Bu Farah, how have you been dealing with this change or a shift, right? Have you seen that in
Open my heart.
yeah.
I mean, it was natural for us from the beginning, what Adele mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I came from the market as well, so the only thing, if you want to do good, the first thing that came into my mind, sustainability. So I guess that's why YCAP started and operated like a social enterprise without the term social enterprise attached to it. It was just recently. So yeah, it's just for me personally, it's been like a natural progression, and I guess open-mindedness, and the I guess for me personally, I like to learn new things and look at the world, how it came to this point, which I think very, very inspiring, where we haven't even talked about the ESG investment, how this one thing creates a leverage for change. 6 trillion already in investment, under this ESG team, and I think that's mainstreaming impact into the business, day-to-day business, and that's what I guess in the next 20 years, maybe we don't even use the word impact investing. It has to create impact, so it's just investment. That's just the nature of investment. So the next generation won't even have to. We are in the transitional, I guess, Adele, transitional era, where we still want to fight for impact everywhere we go, but at some point it will be just we do business as usual. But if you don't include impact in your business thesis, then you will just so obsolete. So that's where the next generation, the talents of next generation came in. They want meaning in everything. That's how we conclude the conversation as well. They want meaning, the world actually creating that through their businesses, and then that's where we find the match. For a sustainably better world.
So good. I guess this leads us to our final and last question. For an ecosystem builder like AVPN, how do you see them, or how do you see the role of AVPN to not necessarily prepare, but to help the next generation embrace, embrace and accelerate.
It's acceleration change. And that's where I think like-minded people and organization come to meet together and then try to create something, that's meaningful. And I think the networks like this, really filters those with that intention to create change, and those with financial ability to kind of support and maybe scale the impacts that is in the community. So I don't know AVPN in the eyes of younger generation. I remember Adele went to your first AVPN to 2019. 2019? Yeah. There was a certain impression, like, oh, so serious people, they even almost dress in black. so that's just the kind of interesting take from the younger generation coming to AVPN, the annual conference, and thinking that you don't have to be that, I don't know.
Formal?
What's the formal? Wait. But if you want to be inclusive to the next generation, you have to speak in the lingo. You have to kind of make it kind of happening, and inviting and inclusive. So that's an interesting thought. We brought it up, and then AVPN now is really
now we have sessions
doing
like
it.
this. No, but I think with AVPN, like ecosystem builders, I think they connect people with one another. As I say, even me and you meeting the CEOs or partners of these initiatives, you get to learn from them, right? And I think that was something I struggled with, when I was in US, in Berkeley and in San Francisco. I wanted to meet like the head of, I don't know, Omnivore Network or Bridgespan, right? But it was impossible. I would like send 100 cold emails because I was a shameless person, and I would get like one reply 6 months later, and I think in events like this, you just get to meet and you get to talk, and I really believe in the power of conversations, exchanging words, exchanging insights, exchanging perspectives, because from words comes action, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I love ABPN. Going to the conferences, wishing it was offline. I think it's hybrid this year. But yeah, I think it's just like for me, meeting people, learning from them, and also exchanging dialogue like this. And I think inspiring as well. I actually first learned about like gender lens investing as the fund was launching last year, but also through webinars that was facilitated by ABPN, because it's such a niche industry and it's like something very new. I think you do need like educators, right? Who has the extensive knowledge and who's willing to learn.
Mentor too.
Yeah,
So you're
willing
like
to learn.
keep that flame, alive.
Give guidance too, because sometimes you're just like lost in all of the chaos. But yeah, so very happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you both so much. I definitely learned so much from these talks, and I know a lot of people will benefit from it as well. So thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right.
Thank you.